from. Tell your girl she can kick it if she wants some, but we got no time to waste.
Welcome to 4AZ. I'm your host, Tyler McDowell Blanken. I'm excited to introduce you to season 2 of our show. Now, this season will focus on newsmakers and hot topics. You'll see some familiar faces, you'll see many new ones, and I hope these conversations will lead you to laugh and learn. On this episode, we'll discuss the Pop Out, Kendrick Lamar's epic concert from last Juneteenth, and its connection to teaching. I'm excited to introduce you all to Desmond Powell, founder and host of Hip to the Games, a podcast dedicated to celebrating the brilliance of basketball and rap. Des, you know you're one of my favorite people. This is a true honor. Welcome to 4AZ, brother. How you been?
Man, I am good, bro. It is an honor to be here in this seat. I know we talked pre-show and everything, but man, this is I'm a big fan of what you're doing, and even for me, like it was like, dang, like wow, I'm on 4AZ. I bet. But at the same time, it's like it's just an incredible opportunity to be a part of what you're doing here, man. So I'm honored, man. I appreciate you.
Thank you, brother. I'm grateful for you, grateful for your words. I'm also grateful for Kendrick Lamar
Yes, sir.
because 1 year ago, he gave us this concert. And there's so many directions we could start this conversation, Des. I want to begin with, where were you when this concert happened? I would imagine you watched it live.
I actually didn't. I was on. I think I was on Twitter. I was just scrolling on Twitter, and then everybody's like, "Oh, stream the pop out. Kendrick's doing his concert," and it's like, "What the heck?" And it's like, so if you're doing the math, like if Kendrick's doing a concert, that means it's all the stuff that he just dropped, most likely. So then I went on the Twitter live stream. So like I came in like the middle of it, and I was like seeing clips here and there and stuff like that. And it was one of those things I was telling everybody, even if I didn't catch the whole thing, Tyler, it was one of those moments where like back in the day, right? Where like you knew when your favorite artist had a dope concert or tour or whatever, you could buy that DVD at wherever,
At
pretty
Best
much.
Buy.
Family Video, Blockbuster,
Yep.
like wherever, right?
How about Circuit City?
Yeah,
Did you all
definitely.
hit up Circuit City?
Yes, yes,
Okay, very
yes.
good.
Vague memories, but yes, I remember Circuit City in the
What an
in the
era.
Joliet area. Right,
You had
right,
to
right.
you had to be there.
Yeah, right, right.
Hip to the games.
Definitely H2DG connection. But yeah, man, it was a lot of that, and I was like, this is one of those shows where you would take the DVD home. Like that's how dope this moment is.
Oh yeah, no doubt. There
Yeah.
were so not only was Kia Forum just packed. I've not been to that venue in LA, but I thought the way that Kendrick structured this, it was to perfection. The venue, the timing being on Juneteenth, the
Yeah.
streaming deal with Amazon, right? What a time we're living in, where arguably the biggest moment in rap of the century, dare I say, was streaming. So just available to millions upon millions of people, not only in the US, but worldwide. Of course, this being in some ways a crescendo of the beef with Drake last summer. It's unbelievable to me that that was 1 year ago, Des. I just,
It
it
went
just,
by so fast.
it dawned on me when I hit you up a few days ago, like, yo, Des, you want to come on 4Z so we can talk the Pop Out and its connection to education and students, which we will get to, I promise. But let's go ahead and transition here then, Des. So the Pop Out, Kendrick and Friends, Kendrick set to close the show about 90 minutes. I was watching it earlier today. What are your initial thoughts 1 year later about this concert? Which memories are most vivid for you?
Oh yeah, man. So that's a good question because I was thinking about that over the last like day, and I was like, really, I think it's just that last image, right? When he got what felt like all of California on stage and like all these different dudes and people and just that picture at the end, right? Like and it looked eerily similar to his cover of To Pimp a Butterfly, right? There was some poetry there where it was two moments, like two major moments in you could say hip hop history. And I thought that it was so important for California, especially. I know you asked, pre-show we were talking, and I know you mentioned how, is this the most important concert of like all of hip hop, right? And I think, it's there's a lot of great concerts out there, so it's hard to say that, but I would definitely say it is the most important concert for California. When you think about the landscape of where they had been the last few years up until that point, right? Like you look at losing Nipsey, you lose Kobe, then it was like COVID, right? And not just the fact that we all struggled with COVID in some sort of fashion, but the fact that like I vividly remember being on spring break in college and everybody saying like, "Yo, this thing is taking root in California." Like the film people that I knew who were over in California doing their internships and whatnot had to rush back to Illinois just to not even get to their homes, but literally go to Illinois, pack their bags and go to wherever they were really from, right? And so you think that California had to deal with the root of COVID pretty much. And then you think about the social unrest that was going on at that time. Like everybody, those years were rough. We know that, Ty, but like for California, those are some rough years. So for Kendrick to, and I think Kendrick mentioned that in the show, right? He was like, "Yo, we lost Kobe, like we lost Nip, like COVID stuff ain't been the same. Like we need a moment like this." And I think that's why that show was way deeper than just what Kendrick was doing in the moment, right? I think it carried so much of California and uplifted their spirits in a way that we hadn't seen in quite some time.
And we're thinking of all of our California viewers and listeners and family and friends. 1 year later, now, summer 2025, there's a lot happening in that state, particularly in LA. And again, thinking of everyone out there. Hope everyone is safe. Okay, Des, that was so well said. What was it about? I think you really started to highlight this. What was it about this moment of the pop out, this particular artist and Kendrick Lamar, that resonated with people in such a profound way? Because you, my friend, are very much a student of the game. What is it
Try to be.
about? What is it about K Dot, this 5'7" skinny dude with prescription glasses and a red hoodie from Compton,
Sounds a lot like
California?
me, minus the
No, no,
Compton
and
part.
yeah,
You know
yeah,
what I
yeah.
mean?
So, but listen, I just renewed my contacts. I have my contacts for this debut episode. But rest assured, I have my prescription glasses as
Yeah,
well.
hashtag season 2.
Out of out of all the artists that have come through hip hop, made some noise, gained fans, what is it about Kendrick as a whole, and particularly again this moment last year, this particular concert, this season of life, which again you started to touch on, that you think resonated with people? Because for me, as someone who's followed Kendrick's career for over a decade, it seems like last summer, particularly this concert, elevated him to a whole new level of stardom.
Yeah, that's a great question, and my mind is running. So hopefully I can answer this to the best to the best of my ability. But I think it's the number one thing that comes to mind is Kendrick's authenticity, and you hear him being synonymous with the phrase "real one," right? We say that about people like that we hold in high regard, right? You a real one, you a real one, and it seems like, to your point, the masses have really gravitated that towards that sentiment in a way that we hadn't seen before. And it's not to say that Kendrick was any less of a real one back in the day, but I think it's what I always say on my pod, right? When you hold that microphone, believe it or not, there is a responsibility that you have when you say I am a hip hop artist. There is a different responsibility than just me going on stage and rapping, right? That you can always tell the difference between somebody who is really doing this for what hip hop stands for, or they just trying to get a bag. Either way is cool. Ty, we all
We've
know.
certainly seen both over the
Yeah, yeah,
years.
yeah, yeah, right. I know you are all about getting the bag, bro. I am, you know what I'm saying? It is nothing wrong with getting the bag. But we see with Kendrick what that difference is, right? It's easy to look at some of those records with with the beef with Drake and everything, but like on a deeper level, it's think about what he dropped before, right? Before this was Mr. Morale, and that was an extremely vulnerable album, and especially for somebody like Kendrick. I went back to read his piece with Harper Bazaar with him and SZA, and he mentioned in there like, I had that upbringing. I couldn't show emotion. Everything was here. I was here with it. It was forming a wall in front of everything and everybody. And it wasn't until you sometimes you get older and you get tired of holding that. And I think that was a big factor in what he was doing with the pop out, like being authentic, and really just I think, like I said, carrying that responsibility the way you're supposed to. Because even like I'm having trouble forming the words because I'm also thinking about the simple fact of what he did as an MC, right? That could be a whole different answer to this question, Ty. Like the fact that This dude went on stage and showed his authenticity, not just his lyrics, but literally the fact that he did not rap over his songs. It was all straight live vocals, breath control. Like that tells you everything about a hip hop artist. If they can get on stage, not relying on their background vocals, not relying on, somebody hype men, right? Like it was all Kendrick. I would say, Ty, that performance from Kendrick and the Jadakiss verses are two of the most incredible examples of hip hop performances that I've seen in my lifetime.
Mm.
And man, I don't know, I could say a lot about it, Ty. I just think that Kendrick Lamar, like what he did with that microphone, is everything you enjoy about hip hop. That's my takeaway.
How do those messages of masculinity and embracing vulnerability, how do those messages hit you now as a 20 something who often discusses these topics on your own show? Did it take you a while to really embrace all those aspects of manhood, or like Kendrick, did you grow up and maybe some messages you got either from media or going to school, did it maybe shy you away from being that open and being that vulnerable, asking for help, admitting when you're scared? Were you like, oh, Kenny, I'm knowing that, I've been knowing that this is how I live? Or even now at this season of your life, did it even resonate with you as an audience member?
Yeah, man. I would say it was a little bit of both. Cause I think, growing up, I felt like, and again, we weren't saying this back then, but like I did feel like uh I was a little bit more tapped into my emotional intelligence compared to a lot of my peers. But at the same time, I, like anybody else, I was following what the world said, right? Boys don't cry, man up, toughen up, suck it up. You're being a wuss, like all those things, you heard growing up. So, you over time you do kind of, wall up in that regard. But to your point, like to see Kendrick doing that, and I think that's the power of hip hop too, right? We see that the most in hip hop. Like everything is like stand your ground, don't show nobody that you a sucker, like all these things. And Kendrick, he took his microphone and he showed another side to where it was like, oh, okay, like maybe it is okay for me to open up a little bit. And to be honest, Ty, I think that's something I'm still trying to understand, right? Like there's still moments where I'm like, oh, I recognize that. Like that's the younger version of you. You're trying to live up to this unrealistic expectation of what it means to quote unquote be a man, right? Like you got to turn that off, or maybe not turn it off, but just kind of recognize where it's coming from and address it, early on instead of just keeping that straight face all the time. I actually want to know what you think about that though, Ty. You my big bro from another. So, I like I said, I'm still, like 27, bro. I still feel like a baby even now. So,
Yeah.
I want to know how you would answer that though.
Yeah, I think my days of feeling like a baby are over, but I I want to embrace my youth as much as I can. My new gimmick Des is I say I'm just a 30 something single guy with a podcast. So what do I know? I have opinions, but what do I know? Yeah, man, it hits me. It really hits home what you said and how you see that being a thread of where Kendrick is at as an artist and as a person. I spend a lot of time reflecting on who are the role models that this generation looks up to, particularly our young men. Who are those people? And ideally these are people in their everyday lives, but in terms of celebrity, who are those folks that we can point to and say, okay, I may not know that person personally, but by all intents and purposes it seems like they are a good compass in terms of someone our youngsters can look at on TV or in the magazines and have their posters, and I feel comfortable with that. I think there's a real lack of those figures now because, to your point, Des, when I think of what does it mean to be a man, and perhaps we see this in a lot of Kendrick's music at this point, I'm thinking it is someone who's a protector, someone who is accountable, someone who is vulnerable, someone who is about their community. Right. So I am all here for it. I am in the season of life now where that's the majority of the music that I personally want to listen to and enjoy. Of course, we need our turn up, right? We need that. I'm not going to totally get rid of that from the playlist. And we
Absolutely.
certainly we had a lot of turning up at the pop out as well. Happy
Yeah.
Juneteenth 2025, everyone. But I just really find myself embracing art that is reflective of where I'm at in my life and the man that I aspire to be. That doesn't mean that you're perfect. That doesn't mean that you are flawless. Uh, God is still working on me. That is for sure.
Hmm.
But to me, that's what really hits home, and that's what I appreciate about where Kendrick is at with his
Yeah.
music. Particularly, I know you mentioned Mr. Morale, which certainly was not delivered to be a commercial album in any way. I think about To Pimp a Butterfly. I think about obviously the most recent release, which we'll briefly discuss in GNX, and a lot of those messages you and I are speaking to. A lot of these themes are what I can hear in his music, and Kendrick has a huge influence, like so many artists, over today's youth. and
Yeah.
and I just worry about, again, some of those role models that are being propped up on social media and such, who I would argue don't align with my definition of what it means to be a protector, to be accountable, to be, to give back to your community and so
And
forth.
Ty, and I appreciate you saying that because that actually kind of helped me think about my answer a little bit more. Because then I'll share this, right? Like, so you often hear, like, I grew up with a single mom, so you often hear like not just the stigmas and like the stereotypes and all the statistics of, I knew at a young age, like, I didn't want to be one of those. Everybody wrote off guys that, young boys that grew up with single moms, like even as young as elementary school. So I knew from a young age I didn't want to be that. And then you also hear like, where there isn't a man is where young boys tend to look at, they're going to find somebody to emulate. And to your point, most of us do that, right? We listen to these artists when we're young and stuff like that. Like, I was in like probably late middle school, early high school when Kendrick was really popping off and gaining momentum. So it's like I always call that era the Big Brother era of rap because so much of what I was hearing back then is chase your dreams, get the girls, we get money, like all those things. But then now we're all 10 years older and it's now like, okay, they still have that effect on me. Like, okay, take care of your community. Like what Kendrick says in Reincarnated, right? I'm trying to bring peace to LA. Like, okay, I can see he's a stand-up dude. Like he's learning from his mistakes. He's holding himself accountable. Those things tend to resonate with me more now. And so like to that point, like you think of like the kids who might be listening to Kendrick, right? And they might be where I was, where they're looking, they may not have somebody up close in the home to study, so they're looking at the people that they like. And I think it's that's when it becomes really important it, to pay attention to the lyrics, pay attention to the actions behind the lyrics, and like I said, in a lot of ways, truly understand, is this artist, I think, like I said, Kendrick has done a great job of really taking hip hop's baton, as I like to say. And I think that's why we see, I at least to my from what I can see, I really do feel like he's got a dope effect on kids. We always hear Wu Tang is for the children, but I think a lot of artists are, and thankfully Kendrick is seems to be a part of that because I think you can learn a lot from his vulnerability and his accountability as of late. Like you said, is he perfect? No, none of us are, but if I'm like speaking on behalf of maybe the kid out there who's trying to find that kind of example to follow at a young age, it teaches you, it certainly teaches you early on how to pick and choose, who you follow. That's for sure.
And both ways of going about rap are lucrative, Des, right? Because we have Kendrick really leaning into the spirit of all those qualities you just said, and then we have his mortal enemy in Drake. And I've been transparent to you, Des. I am typically
You
the
have.
biggest Drake fan in any and every friend group or group chat that I am in. But clearly, Drake is leaning back into. I mean, I'm sure you've heard Nokia. I can't turn on the
A little
radio and
bit.
not hear that.
A
I
little
see
bit.
it's back on Instagram Reels and people's posts, and that's been his lane. That's been his bag, is making music for Instagram captions and for the turn up. But it seems like you have two different ways to perhaps pursue a career in the industry, both being lucrative. But I, at this point in my life, I tend to lean toward what we're getting from a lot of Kendrick's artistry.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Like you said it earlier, bro. Like, and I feel like sometimes my homies, they think that like I have this huge problem with Drake or artists like Drake,
Let's
and
talk. Let's talk about it.
it's just it's just that when you get onto the side of hip hop and you realize what it's truly about, and like I said, holding that baton and honestly learning from some of the pioneers' mistakes as well as their successes, and just again, it was all about positivity, and it was fun, right? Hip hop was created to be fun, right? So there's nothing wrong with that. But when you are an artist that's, let's say, you almost 40 and you still rapping about the stuff that you was rapping when you were 20, versus being an artist who's in their 40s and are actually relating to what 40-year-olds go through, that to me is where, you I can't, like you said it, bro. We talked about this on my platform before.
We,
It's
we, had,
it's
we had a whole
sad. It's
you
sad.
had a whole episode. We had a whole conversation about Aubrey Drake Graham. Check out Hip to the Games, by the way, at
It
Desmond
is
Powell
it, it
underscore.
it's sad to think about. Like, it's, again, I have no ill will for Drake, but it's just sad to think about in terms of like hip hop evolution. And when you think about how we started, Ty, I don't want to get into a whole different conversation, bro. I feel like my thoughts are all over the place. So, I want to kind of keep it steady. But yeah, man, there's room for the turn up, but there are a lot of us that's growing, and we want the music to match our growth.
Yeah, well said. All right, Des. Well, speaking of growth, let's get into the education connection that we have here with Kendrick Lamar. So, you and I spoke about this during the pregame. When I think about the teacher that I aspire to be, I often reflect on who I was as a student, K through 12, especially during high school, since that's my chosen age group. And the classes that had the biggest impact on me, the teachers I connected with the most, were the ones who taught in a culturally relevant way, where they had the unit plans, they had the clear learning objectives for the day, but also were strategic in infusing what was going on in everyday life, whether it was culturally related, artists, films, societal news, or otherwise, when it felt like I was learning in real time and we kind of mix the history with what's happening today and why all of this matters. I had such a euphoric, I was going to make a Euphoria connection, one of Kendrick's songs. I was so euphoric. No, I'll skip it. We're past it now. But I just felt euphoric though, because it's like, oh man, that's when learning is at its apex. That's what in many ways inspired me to try to be similar to the teachers that I had in terms of that output and that impact you can have on folks. So
That's great, bro.
so with K Dot, actually, before we get into the connections I want to make to his music and maybe how that can be used, his art can be used in classes now in 2025, heading into this new school year in the fall. I want to know, who was Desmond Powell as a student?
Oh, wow. Um, That's a great question. I would say, okay, I would say Desmond as a student was very quiet, very, especially when I was younger. I know it's crazy. Like, I have a podcast and I do a lot of talking now, but Ty, I couldn't keep a conversation to save my life when I was a kid. Like, I was extra introverted, always the quiet kid. Like, even, I'm sure obviously my mom would be able to speak on this much better than me probably, but like, I even think back to like our report cards like back in the day, and it's like it was always kind of the same things. Like, Desmond is so quiet, like, he's a great student. It would be cool if he participated more, or like he's always helping the kids, like he doesn't say much, but the other day I saw him teaching somebody a new word, or I was that kid. Like, I was always on my studies, like not crazy great grades for most of my, like, in a grand scheme of school, like I was A's and B's, but like in that, I was just always focused. I was quiet, and I just, my mom instilled in us when we were young, like, knowledge is power, education is the key. So like, I did, I was always focused. I was always a focused, quiet dude, man. Like,
Where did that introvertedness stem from?
man, I kind of always had it, if I'm being honest. I know it, like I said, some people might see different sides of me and think maybe otherwise, but like, I've just always been a real chill dude, real introverted, homebody, like always, bro, always. Like, even again in my 20s, that's something I'm trying to like break out of, but also kind of understand as I get older. But yeah, man, I was just always introverted. Like, that was my thing. Like, even in the aspect of education, I'll even say this, bro. Like, even as like up to college, there were times like some of my teachers would say like, "Hey, get in a group, do a project," but I'd ask like, can I do this by myself? Like, if that's cool. And it
You were
wasn't
you were you
necessarily,
were that student.
yeah, and I know,
Wow.
like, I even I found an old tweet that I made about that, and I know because that kind of reaction, like your classmates can kind of look at you like, who do you think you
Who do
are,
you think you
like,
are? Yeah, who is
you
this?
know,
Who is this? Who is this
but
cat?
it's like my thing was it was never personal. It was genuinely like how I like to work, like, and honestly, to a fault sometimes. I think you brought up a similar point earlier, like that's something that I'm kind of growing out of too. Like, again, that was one of the walls that I put up, like, growing up. Like, I felt like I had to do things by myself. I had to do things. I had to show people that I was capable of being independent, or I was capable of handling things. You know, you always, growing up, you always heard adulting is this, adulting is hard, adulting is this. So it's like I got to show that I'm an adult, and I got to learn to do things by myself. And I think so some of that I think was buried in it, but like a lot of that just carried into my education, man. Like, again, it's not that I couldn't do group projects or things of that nature. It's not like I didn't like the kids, right? It was just sometimes I just felt like I could work better alone at my own pace, things of that nature. But I just think that was something that was always in me, bro.
Well, it sounds like your teachers were accommodating as well. I would imagine
They were.
that they had to kind of decide for, okay, sometimes I want to push Des to be the best Des he can be, but then also if he's asking for this, I think that's the beauty of teaching is you can study, you can prepare, but you're going to have situations where you just have to make decisions in the moment and do what you know in your heart in that moment is best for Desmond or for whoever is in your class.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a great. See, as a student, I never thought of it like that, but like now, you know, that makes that
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense. I'm grateful for those experiences for sure.
Absolutely. And one shout out to your sister as well. I know she is an early childhood educator. So,
Yeah.
congratulating her on wrapping up the school year, thanking her for being a hero and for serving so many kids and families. And shout out to everyone out there. Hopefully, if you've already started your summer, hopefully you're rejuvenating and kicking back and enjoying this combo. If you are wrapping up your school year here in a few days or few weeks, you got this. The finish line is in sight. And thanks for hanging out with Des and I. Okay,
Not
Des.
all heroes wear capes. Sometimes they wear button ups or dresses. You feel me?
Thank you, Metro Boomin. Thank you, Desmond Powell. I couldn't agree more. I love it. Okay, something else I also love, Des. Again, get into the academic connection here. I know I could talk to you for a long time about Kendrick, Drake, and everything under the sun. I want to connect this to academics because I think Kendrick is one of those artists, contemporary artists in particular, whose work can seamlessly be infused in academia. I know I have the luxury of teaching high school, specifically English language arts. So, it's nice that we do have some autonomy at times to make those connections with texts or other content that is a part of our state and district and school plan and standards. So I want to run this by you, Des, and please let me know what you think. If it's fire, I
Okay.
want to know that. If it's trash, I also want to know that so I can edit the Google Doc and be ready for the fall. Okay, so ninth grade. That's a grade that was particularly crucial for me when I was a student. I know you and I both relate to not only prescription glasses and being skinny and being short kings like Kenny, but also
Indeed.
isn't it
True
amazing
indeed.
too? Like Kendrick, like he doesn't fit that traditional like huge rapper archetype, from a vanity perspective. But the way he was able to control that audience, he was
Oh,
just 10 feet. That's the part I love about him is like, man, the confidence. Des, I'll be giving a presentation and my voice can get a little bit shaky sometimes. Like I already have
yeah.
the slideshow, I already know what I want to say, but in front of 25 teenagers or 12 colleagues, even I still get a little bit, those jitters. And then Kendrick is performing in front of 10,000 people in Kia Forum and it's just,
Right. It's
it's,
just another day for him. Like,
yeah, it's just another day.
what?
It's something to strive for sure. Okay, so ninth grade, here's what I want to run by you. So let's say, for example, we have the tragedy of Romeo and Juliet by William Shakespeare, classic dramatic piece. Was this a part of your ninth grade English language arts experience? Did you all get into Romeo and Juliet at all? Were you Macbeth?
No, no. I shoot. Ninth grade was probably
Yes.
To
It
Kill
was
a Mockingbird. You know,
To
not
Kill a
even like,
Mockingbird, of course.
I didn't get Shakespeare till college, and even then, I don't think it
Oh,
was Romeo and Juliet. I don't even
okay.
remember what it was, but yeah, yeah,
Okay.
that was more so where I was at.
Okay. Well, a classic piece. And what I like to do when teaching these stories, in particular in the case of Romeo and Juliet, is okay. We have Shakespeare's writing, and it can be very difficult to understand. I know I struggled with it when I was a student. Of course, we have multiple film adaptations. What I love doing is when reading these stories, asking students, and this in this case particularly a play, asking students to analyze and evaluate a text. When asking them to do that, I would often and still do encourage them to search for a companion piece of art that showcases similar symbols, themes, and so on and so forth. So Romeo and Juliet, I love the story. First of all, I know that's kind of a hot topic or a debate. I really enjoy it because I think it can be so transferable to other pieces of art. So, for example, hear me out, Desmond Powell. What if we have the tale of Romeo and Juliet, classic love tragedy, two star-crossed lovers? What if we look at Kendrick's discography, we have a character like Shireen in Good Kid, Mad City, right? Who
Hmm.
Kendrick is trying to get to know, trying to pursue. If we ask students again to choose either a poem or a song or a television show, Stranger Things, I think season 5 is coming out soon. Like, what if we ask them to choose a companion piece and then kind of compare and contrast again the symbols, the themes, even characters, maybe Shireen to Juliet, Kendrick to Romeo, so on and so forth. So, Des, can I sell you on Romeo and Juliet and then choosing a song or a character? I think it's brilliant. I think it gives kids entry points into really analyzing a text. And again, I think for Kendrick, we have multiple potential songs that could work for this. But top of mind for me was Shireen in Good Kid, Mad City. It's one of my favorite Kendrick Lamar albums. I know we haven't talked about Good Kid yet, but
No, you know what's funny? When you first proposed the idea of me coming on here, that was like the first thing that came to mind. I'm like, we're gonna talk about Shireen, obviously. Like, it just makes sense when I think education, storytelling. Shireen is gonna come up. That is really a dope idea, Ty. And admittedly, I feel a little underprepared because now I feel like, dang, I gotta go through Kendrick's discography real
there's so
quick. See,
many.
you know. But I think, and I think the crazy thing is, Ty, you could even just open the field and be like, where do you see yourself in Kendrick's story out of all his? And that doesn't mean you have to be Kendrick. You might be Shireen. You know what I'm saying? if I'm being 100, you might be Shireen. Or, I like one of my favorites is off To Pimp a Butterfly, How Much a Dollar Costs. Like, it's so many avenues you could take it, right? Like, but like you said, just at that point, I like your idea, Ty. I like your idea. But I'm definitely with you on the Shireen thing. Yeah, like you could definitely there's definitely a lane for
There's
that.
so much, and the whole story of Romeo and Juliet being based around the Capulets and the Montagues. You have these two feuding families, and that's why they can't be together. Is because they come from these families, and it's not going to work. And to me, Good Kid, Mad City, it's more than just an album. It reads and sounds like a play.
You said
Kendrick
it,
is
man.
taking you through this whole. It's a movie, is it not?
Bro, Kendrick Lamar is hip hop's playwright. I will stand on that for life. He is. You have a lot of archetypes. Sometimes you can be so dope at this thing called hip hop that you develop your own archetype. Kendrick Lamar is hip hop's playwright. I know KRS-One is the teacher. That's awesome, right? Shout out for AZ Education. KRS-One has been doing this hip hop education for a long time, right? You could say, I don't know, you could say Big Daddy Kane is like the master of flow, right? And this is just off the top of my head, but like I've always said, especially, and I think Mr. Morale stamped it. Kendrick Lamar is hip hop's playwright. His ability to bring visuals to what you're listening to is uncanny. And we know this, Ty, like all great storytellers, to your point, Shakespeare and so many countless others are great at bringing you an image when you think like the best storytellers are going, you can see where they're at even if you've never experienced anything they're talking about. You can see it. Kendrick Lamar is the epitome of that. So I am with you, bro. I am with you.
He absolutely is. And then if we go to, let's say, 12th grade, right? So we just talked about ninth grade. Then if we have 12th grade, if we have
Okay.
seniors,
Mm-hmm.
a text that I know I studied when I was coming up and that I've often used for senior English is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley.
Mm.
Classic tale, great example of prose fiction. And okay, we'll do something more current. GNX. We're going to get to your concert experience soon. That I was gonna say that film. That album has suspense and thriller-like sounds and elements throughout. And I put in my notes, it's like a movie for your ears, which I just said about Good Kid as well. And the topics that both of these works share, Frankenstein and let's say again Kendrick's most recent album, GNX, one of probably my favorite Kendrick album actually. Both works share these topics of masculinity, vulnerability, vanity, the pursuit of perfection, ambition versus morality. So, in terms of a potential lesson idea, how cool would it be, Des, if you have a warm up? Some people call it bell work, do now. I like to call it a warm up. If students come to class and they write down their response to these two questions, first, how do you know when someone deserves forgiveness? Second, is ambition justified if it requires the loosening of one's morals? We see those two questions play out in Frankenstein with the character of Dr. Frankenstein and creating this monster. And then certainly in GNX, Kendrick, Drake. Kendrick is just not a fan of Drake for numerous reasons. I think Drake is certainly an ambitious guy, but one could argue perhaps he's bent his morals a bit to get to where he's at. So again, the connections we can make for students doesn't have to just be Kendrick. Des, I think if we really invest in artists who our students are listening to music wise, the possibilities are endless to really connect with kids. It just so happens that again, our conversation is based around the most famous hip hop artist, on the planet right now. So if we have those two questions, and then let's say an activity following that bell work or that warm up being students annotating the lyrics to a Kendrick song, going back to your point about To Pimp a Butterfly, how much a dollar cost. What if we go to the last song on that album, Moral Man? That's one of my favorite Kendrick songs
Mm.
of all time. And we could ask students during the annotation, what are the themes of the song? Mortal Man, excuse me. What are the themes of the song? How does that connect back to Frankenstein or the text we're using in class, whatever that is? And it really can build students' analytical skills, their communication skills. And to me, the possibilities would really be endless. Now, that being said, whether we live in Joliet, Illinois, or Glendale, Arizona, of course, disclaimer, it's important to make sure this is district approved or department approved, right? Because I know, especially now, there is a lot of oversight into the content that students are able to teach. You have your approved text list, but then often, in my experience, Des, if you want to insert poems or songs or a TED talk, even in a lot of cases, you have to get that approved by your administration. So, of course, it
Mhm.
always comes with a disclaimer, but I think it's important now more than ever that teachers, that educators look for creative ways to reach students. I think with Kendrick Lamar's discography, we have lots of opportunities to do that.
Ty, man, that is why you are who you are, bro. You nailed that, man. You nailed that. Like even for me, okay, and for our listener here, I all the education experience I have is one semester in college. I thought I was gonna do it. I didn't get that far, but even then, Ty, the little bit that I have that I was able to learn, that is an excellent layout, bro. Like even in the sense too, I even thought of a question, especially for like thinking of the seniors, right? You could even take a look at Reincarnated off of GNX and be like, okay, listen to that.
Wow.
Let's skip to the last verse.
Yeah.
If you had a conversation with your freshman self, what would that like in a few
Love
sentences,
that.
what do you think that would sound like? Right.
Hmm. Hmm.
And even the question you asked about forgiveness, that is a really deep question. And if you don't mind, like even just my initial thoughts as you were saying that, it's interesting. What makes a person deserve forgiveness, right? That was the question.
Yeah.
But
How would you answer that?
it's also see, but then again, I have the luxury of being almost 27. So like at what, how old I was, 17, I definitely wouldn't say this, but it's also the other side of it is like, well, how do you know when you're at peace to give somebody forgiveness? I don't necessarily think, I don't know if forgiveness is necessarily a thing you can say you deserve, but it is certainly a thing that you can evaluate and say, for my peace, I'm going to choose to forgive this person. Or, for my peace, I'm going to apologize because I don't like carrying this negative emotion in my heart. Or hey, maybe like I said something to somebody and maybe it's the opposite. Maybe I was the one that did damage to somebody else. It's like, okay, to what we said earlier, accountability, right? You know what? Like I'm in a different place now. What I said back then was not reflective of who I am today. So this is how I know that. Like it's at this point, it's not even about me receiving the forgiveness. It's just more so like, hey, like I just want to live peaceably with all men. Like so it's a different ways you could take it, bro. But that was what came to my mind.
I love that. And we need to give students credit because whether they're 7 or 14 or 17, uh, they're human beings as well, and they're experiencing life. Life looks different for them. They're not hopefully paying rent or thinking about other worries of the world, but they're not polishing up their resume. I guess you could when you're 14 and definitely 17, but they're dealing with who are my real friends? How do I forgive? How do I ask for forgiveness? Is that okay? Yes, it is always okay to apologize and learn from your mistakes. They're living
Social
life.
media.
Social media, there's so many avenues to talk about image, identity, social media, societal pressures. I think sometimes we just sort of look at students and think, okay, they're here, they need to do the work, they need to pass and listen when I'm speaking, but allowing them the opportunity to interact with each other, to listen to each other, to respond, and again to have the awareness of, okay, I'm keeping my eyes open and my ears open to what are students saying, what are they listening to, who is really influencing culture for them, and then looking for ways to include that in your curriculum. I just feel blessed as that I've chosen a subject that really aligns with the ability to do so in English language arts. Right? I really commend the amazing teachers out there who are teaching, say, science, math, certainly history, and all the other amazing subjects one can study. For me, it's just a seamless transition into, okay, here's the text we're using right now. Here are the skills we're developing. Here's the signature project, and then I can look for avenues to bring in, again, name the artist who I know students are really into these days and can connect with, and maybe see an entry point into, okay, I haven't been a fan of English language arts before this year, but now I see a way where maybe it can be less miserable because we're talking about an artist or we're discussing things that I'm going through right now. I'm going through a breakup. I've had students, Des, I don't know if you've had this experience where uh, there will be a couple in a class and then they break up during the year. And then that's where you have to be a little bit careful there. But we
You got to
know,
watch that seating chart, man.
yeah, yeah, we gotta watch that scene. Exactly. Point being, kids are experiencing life, and I think it's imperative for us to give them the opportunities to have their voices heard, but then also again see them reflected in in class and in the content that we're delivering every day.
Yeah, yes, sir. Yes, sir. One of the I'll even just a quick thing on that, Ty, like I'll I'll even add like the best my favorite teachers, especially like high school kind of range, were the ones that often kind of went away from what the curriculum was for that day and just talked to us about life. Especially once we were seniors, right? Sometimes when you're a senior, like you just get those kind of lectures of like, hey, listen, you guys are going to the next level, like okay, like you have a test today, but like these are other things you might be dealing with.
You're
Like
leaving the
this
G.
is
You're leaving the G League soon.
right, exactly, exactly. We going to the NBA, Toto. Like that's what it is, you know. And my favorite teachers were the ones like you said, like even just small things, like hey, Des, nice jersey. Oh shoot, you like basketball. I would have never thought because you're always up here, on the mathematics or whatever, which is great, but I'm kind of struggling in this area. But now I feel a little bit more open minded to challenge myself in this area just off the human level of, hey, like my teacher likes basketball like I do, like other interests or you name it. Like I think that goes a huge, that goes a very long way in terms of education and the connection with students. So I love that you brought that up.
I love that you mentioned that, and I love the jersey collection. I've seen pictures of you from back in the day that you've shared on social. I'm like, man,
Man,
Des was showing up to school with the flyest jerseys out there. I've seen those champion throwbacks, and
I know,
your
yeah.
teachers clearly recognize that. Well
you
said. I
know,
couldn't agree more.
yeah, man. I shout out my mom, man. I had it
Shout
good
out
as a kid.
moms.
I miss my jerseys, man. I've been trying to develop it again in adulthood, man. You know how hard it is.
Yeah,
Mitchell and Ness ain't we don't get the same prices back
we
then.
need more sales from Mitchell and Des. We need it. All right, Des, although this is your first time on the show, and again, thank you so much for being here. You know how we do it around here. it's time for our exit ticket. Des, we got to hear you attended the GNX concert. We got Kendrick, we got SZA. Fill us in. How was that experience this summer?
Oh man, that was somebody I my sister sent me a TikTok. Somebody said, um, I have post concert depression, and their caption on the post was, "Life should feel like this all the time," and that is exactly how it felt, Tyler. Like it was an incredible experience, especially for me. Like just speaking on myself, like I mentioned countless times this episode that I'm a homebody. I have a lot of introvert tendencies, so anytime I get to leave my regular town of Joliet to go to like the electricity of Chicago, and then to have a experience like that, like me and Devon were talking, my brother, we were talking, and we were like, we got to see Kendrick at like the height of this, right? Like you mentioned it earlier. You could say that this is like the apex of his career, even as great as he's been. And we got to enjoy that moment. Like we got to be a part of that moment. And that was just incredible, bro. Like this, even the synergy of like him and SZA, like, I can't front, I wasn't all the way hip to SZA as far as like her solo stuff. I knew some of her recent hits, but she like really impressed me. When I was there, she had great like stage production. Her guitarist, I don't know who her guitarist was, but he was out there killing it. Ty, like, it was just an incredible moment. You know me, like hip to the games, like I'm a bar nerd, and so just even where our seats were, just having a perfect view of center stage. Like I wanted Kendrick to know, like, okay, it's a lot of people in this Soldier Field right now, but like I see you, bro. Like I can, let's rap. You know what I mean? Like I'm rapping. I'm rapping.
Here's my card. I got a podcast. Would love to have the games.
Like my brother and my sister, they were like telling me, they're like, Des, you were hype, dude. Like
Really?
and I'm telling you, Ty, like I know
What type of concert goer is Des? Do you rap with the lyrics? Do you
oh,
kind of sit back?
I have
Is
to.
it
So I
both?
compare it to like Disney World. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Like I can't, if I go on like three of the dopest rides in Disney World, I can't go on something slow. Like it's gonna kill the vibe for me. So like the Kendrick thing was a great balance, because like I could vibe a little bit with SZA, but then when I knew TV off was coming or Squabble Up was coming, you know what I'm saying? I'm in that mode, Ty. Like I said, I think it's that other side of me that I think a lot of people don't really get to see that often. If
They're
I'm
like
being honest,
this dude isn't an introvert. He's
right?
outside.
No, straight up.
He's rapping every lyric to Not Like Us. How loud did it get at Soldier when Not
It
Like
was
Us came on?
loud. It was like, there have been some posts. I think even one of SZA's dancers was like, "Yo, Chicago, like y'all showed out," and even for us to, and it kind of depends on like where you're sitting, right? So like, there were some moments where we kind of felt bad for Kendrick, because it was like sometimes he was playing some of like his early stuff, right? So and it wasn't too much, but there was just some verses where it was like you can tell a lot of the crowd did not know it, or and it was like, dang, I was like, please don't let us be the crowd that is like, we only came for GNX. But after a while, we warmed up and you realize people just knew different songs, and like, man, I can't speak for everybody. I just know like it was hype there, and I was rapping everything. Ty, I posted a couple on my Instagram, and literally, bro, I got videos of Not Like Us. I got videos of Squabble Up and things of that nature, but I cannot post them because all you will see is the camera shaking from me rapping and getting hyped. Like it was an incredible
Wow.
experience, bro. Like that is the stuff that makes life, bro. And to enjoy it with my sister and my brother, like that's those priceless moments, bro. Like I'll never forget.
100%. I love that for you. Des, before you get out
Yeah.
of here, tell us about Hip to the Games. We got the NBA Finals popping off. The W is back. Lots of WNBA action. And of course, you do an amazing job of, again, infusing hip hop, whether it's album celebrations, song memories, song breakdowns in particular. You do thorough, great, entertaining work. Tell us more about how we can connect with you and support Hip to the Games.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Ty. So yeah, you can follow Hip to the Games on all platforms at HIP, the number two, DAGAMES. Um, it's really just where, like you said it earlier, like the place that genuinely celebrates basketball and hip hop. Like that was the thing that I really wanted to harp on when I started podcasting. Like it's a lot of discourse with basketball, and even I get caught up into it sometimes. You know, sometimes it feels like the barbershop. You know, you know that, Ty, but at the same time, I wanted to treat a lot of these basketball players like they were human, right? And actually kind of speak from an understanding level, you know, like a certain level of understanding that says, like, hey, I see this person a little bit more than just a basketball player. So I try to sneak that in with my analysis and things of that nature. At the end of the day, I just love talking hoops. It's my first love, you know, and the hip hop side of things, you know. Hopefully this episode kind of cater to that a little bit. But I can, like, as the younger kids say, I can yap a lot when it comes to hip hop, and the way I do that on the show is just through song breakdowns. I love lyrics. I love the depth that they carry. I love the way even artists say the words, right? Like there's a rap nerd in me that, you know, it's the same thing. Like I can understand why a rapper says a certain word a certain way, or why they have a certain line, why that punchline hit for this kind of reason. Like all of that nerdy stuff. If you're into all that nerdy stuff, you definitely want to tap into Hip to the Games. You know, like I said, it's just a great opportunity for me. I've been blessed to just even you know, have an idea to where I can do that and at least try to get people who think the same way I do, you know, to satisfy the inner nerd in all of us. So, you know, if that's you'll enjoy Hip to the Games. That's that. You know, Ty, I don't really, I still struggle with ways to how to say it, but I think that's the gist of it, man.
Beautiful. Well, you heard it here first. Support Des. Thank you, Des, for joining us for this great episode. Thank you all for tuning in. Follow the show at 4AZTeach and 4AZTeach.org. We'll see you next time.